We have to thank Professor DeGangi. Almost everybody in the room is from Professor DeGangi's class. And that's terrific that you're all here with us today. We have a few others from other classes and some other faculty. My name is Nadia Rubai. I am one of the co-directors of the Institute for Genocide and Mass Atrocity Prevention, and I'm very excited that we've got a great audience here today to listen to Joseph Seberenzi's talk about his path from bitterness to forgiveness and the lessons that he brings that relate to atrocity prevention from his experience in Rwanda. Before introducing him, though, and giving him the opportunity to talk, I want to share with you some information about some other upcoming activities and opportunities in conjunction with the Institute. And I actually want to give an opportunity to my colleague Max Pensky and the Assistant Director of the Institute, Stephen Capobianco.
So Hi, thanks, Sonny. So I'm the co-director of the Institute along with Professor Rubai. Wanted to remind you of, or tell you about two things that are happening. One is our annual conference is this Friday and Saturday, the 5th and the 6th. It is not a regular academic conference. It is an international gathering where academics and atrocity prevention practitioners from around the world gather in Binghamton to discuss, to notes and experience, and to brainstorm about how best to carry on the global struggle against mass violence, mass atrocity, and genocide. For undergraduates, it's a very rare opportunity to actually have an insight into how non-academic people work in this field, and so you're all cordially invited to that. It's free, but registration is required, and you can do that on our website. Also, an event that's specifically geared toward Binghamton University undergraduates happens at the end of this month on April 27th and 28th. The Institute will be holding a mass atrocity intervention exercise. The tragic genocide in Rwanda that you're going to hear about today was preventable. All genocides are preventable. What the atrocity prevention exercise does is give undergraduates a real world experience in what it would be like to be among the state actors and international organization actors that have to deal with and respond to and understand an unfolding atrocity situation, hypothetical one, in real time. Again, that exercise is free, but registration is also required. We're nearly full, but we'll be continuing to accept additional players up until about the 10th, I believe, of April. And if you're interested in that and participating in that event, there's full information again on our website. And again, if you have any questions about either of these two events, especially about the intervention exercise, which is going to be a really extraordinary thing, please don't hesitate to give me an email. All that information is there on our website.
Stephen, you want to talk about another opportunity?
Yeah, so I'm curious, how many of you know about the GMAT minor? Okay, a few of you. All right, so we have this really unique opportunity for anyone that's interested in the minor. The two conditions for it are being a registered minor and good academic standing. And so the money that we were given by a donor was to support students for doing a summer internship related to genocide and mass atrocity prevention. So we have up to 6 awards, up to $7,000 per student. So the priority deadline just passed, but I don't have up to 7 students. So if you want to 6 students, so if you still are interested in pursuing a summer internship, you can either work with us, or if you obtain one independently, you can apply. The link is still available on Handshake, on Higher Bang, so you'd be able to log on there, get more information. It's also on our website under the undergraduate minor. So if you have any questions about that, or if you're interested in that opportunity, feel free to reach out to me. My information is also on the website.
And I just want to clarify, for the minor, it's an interdisciplinary minor that has classes that are drawn from departments all across campus. And so regardless of what your major is, there are opportunities for you to pull classes that you're probably already taking and incorporate an atrocity prevention lens. There is a required class that's offered every fall that's part of that, an Essentials of Genocide and Mass Atrocity Prevention. And then you can shape it in a way that makes sense for you. And there aren't many other minors on campus that will give you an opportunity to have a well-paid summer internship, which could be based here in the United States, or it could be something that includes a study abroad opportunity or something like that. So if you're interested in that, please do follow up with that. In addition to the exciting student simulation, students often talk about how classrooms are just a little bit too dry, and the educational experience in that simulation at the end of the month is a great opportunity to get in and experience what it would be like if you were actually doing this kind of work in a nonprofit organization, non-governmental organization, or a government organization. So let me transition now to introducing our guest, who we're very excited to have here. He is one of our Institute's practitioners in residence, which is a program where we bring practitioners who work in some aspect of atrocity prevention, which we define very broadly, and we bring them to campus for a week to talk to classes, to meet individually with faculty and students, and to make a presentation like this so that we can learn from their experiences and we have an opportunity to ask questions. So since yesterday and continuing through tomorrow, we're honored to have with us Joseph Seberenzi, who's spoken to a class yesterday and will be speaking to more classes tomorrow, and is also here to talk with us today. His experience, now he works for the U.S. national government. He's worked for the U.S. Department of Justice and currently works for the Department of Homeland Security in Immigration and Citizenship Services. Prior to that, though, he has experience as Speaker of the Parliament in Rwanda, post-genocide, from 1997 to 2000. And he also is the author of a book called God Sleeps in Rwanda, a Journey of Transformation, which is the reason why he's here, because I happened to read his book and then reach out to him and say, we'd love to have you here and then to share your story. And he's going to share a story with us that is both personal and generalizable. And I hope it's something that we can all learn from. And he has an exciting story to tell and important lessons to share with us, and then we'll be available for your questions after that. So I hope you all give him your attention, but let's give him a Binghamton welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here to share my story, a story of anger and bitterness, and how I managed to move from that anger and bitterness to forgiveness, basically because of the genocide that took place in Rwanda, in which I lost so many people. So that journey, I should say, it started in 1994, and it was in Canada. I was in Canada that time. I was in Ontario, and I remember as if it were yesterday, when I was in my room, a small room. I had been in Canada for a few months seeking asylum in that country. And then one day I heard the telephone ring. It was about 5 a.m. in the morning. When it rang, I woke up quickly, opened the door, and ran into the living room and picked up the phone and said, hello. Then the other person on the end of the phone said hello, and it was my brother. It was my younger brother, Emmanuel, who was calling from my home country of Rwanda. So Emmanuel had just returned from our village to see if our parents, our brothers and sisters had survived, because the genocide had targeted my ethnic group, and they targeted everyone in the whole country. So he was calling to tell me what had happened to our family. And he said, I have bad news. Of course, I expected bad news, but what he said next was really heartbreaking. He said, Papa and Mama have been killed. Oh my God, I said, so my heart skipped. I felt as if there was electric shock cutting through my chest. So it was really bad. Then he went on to say that my brothers and my sisters, so he gave some names. So David, Samuel, Edith, Martha, and the others have been also killed. I couldn't really believe to hear, just in a few minutes, to hear that my mother is gone, my father is gone, brothers, sisters are gone, and many others. It was so sad, and I can't really tell you how I felt. I felt helpless, as if it was the end of the world. And I can show you some pictures here, just to give an idea of the loss. So this was one of the pictures that I was able to recover after the genocide. And on this picture, you can see my, oh, what do I do? How do I point there? Is it? No, that's different. Okay, I think this way. Okay, I got it. Okay. So this is my father. So hearing that my father was gone, it was heartbreaking, as I said. Then this is my mother. And on this picture, you can also see my brother Samuel. And this was actually the wedding. This was a picture taken at a wedding, the wedding of my brother. And my brother Samuel, his wife, and their 3 children were also killed in the genocide. And you can also see my sister here, my cousin here. So almost everyone on this picture was killed in the genocide. And I don't think I would have survived if I were in the country at that moment. And I'm here on this picture, and this picture was taken in, I think, in 1980. So this is my brother. This is another brother killed. So almost everyone on this picture was killed. So as I said, I don't think I would have survived. But I was very lucky because I left before the genocide together with my wife and our son. And once I was in Burundi, which is south to Rwanda, I tried to convince my parents to come, but they thought, oh, it has happened before. Maybe it will not happen. The genocide will not happen. It's fine. But I was able to convince one of my brothers, this one, Emmanuel, the one who called me when I was in Canada. So Emmanuel joined me in Burundi. That's how he survived. The only other sibling who survived was one of my sisters here. She survived because she was married to a Hutu man, and that Hutu man protected her during the genocide. But others perished in that genocide. Then after Emmanuel told me that our parents are gone, brothers, sisters, and others are gone, I asked him whether our younger brother survived, John. John was like my son. He went to school, in middle school, and while he was in middle school, he stayed at my house. So he was like my son. So I asked him whether he survived, and he said, no, he didn't survive. So I couldn't believe, and I started basically crying that he was also gone. It was so terrible. And before I could go ahead and ask Emmanuel about the fate of other family members, because I come from a very large family, Emmanuel said, don't ask me names. Everyone is gone. I was speechless, and I had to really stop the conversation, and I told my brother, Emmanuel, I said, we need to stop here. Let's talk again. And I told him, please be strong. There is nothing we can do. We cannot change what has happened. Let's talk again later. So before I move on, let me show you the picture of John I was talking about. John is here. He's holding a baby, and this baby happened to be my son. He's my son, my first son. That was in 1990. But my son survived, but my younger brother, as I said, he perished in that genocide. So after that conversation ended, it was basically the beginning of a long journey of agony and, of course, forgiveness. So a journey that started with anger, really anger but luckily it ended with forgiveness. And you can understand why I was very angry. I was very angry at our neighbors who killed our loved one, because the people who killed my parents and my siblings were people that we knew each other by names, people we shared drinks with, people who I played with their kids, we played soccer together. These were not strangers, were people we knew very well. But on that day, during those 3 months, from April to July 1994, they killed my parents, our brothers, sisters, and this genocide took place all over the country until about 800,000 people were killed. And these people were killed not with guns, but mostly with machetes. So it was horrible. It was really terrible. Now, I spent almost 3 months really in agony, not having sleep, having stomachache, feeling very bad, very angry at our neighbors, very angry at Belgium, who divided Hutu and Tutsi in Rwanda, because what happened in 1994 actually started long before, when Belgium opposed Hutu and Tutsi, and that led to violence in the 1950s. It led to violence in the 1970s. So it was really horrible. So I was very angry at them. And I was, of course, angry at the international community, which failed to prevent the genocide, and which, during the genocide, decided not to intervene to stop the genocide. So it was really tough. But it came a time when I decided to leave Canada and go back to Rwanda. And I spoke with my friends who were in Canada as refugees. I told them, you know what? I want to go back to Rwanda. They said, why? I said, I want to go to Rwanda to help in reconstruction, in reconciliation. They said, why would you go to a country like Rwanda when you are in Canada, a wonderful country? You must be crazy. And I think I was crazy, a little bit crazy, to go to Rwanda. Then my friend managed to convince me, and I stayed. But a few months later, I made a decision to go, and I informed my friends. I told them, I don't need your advice. I'm telling you that I'm ready to go back to Rwanda, and I went back to Rwanda. But when I got in Rwanda, it was no longer the Rwanda I knew, and my anger really intensified. When I went back to Rwanda, it was a terrible situation. It was like a graveyard. They were still burying people. There were many people walking around with crutches. You could see someone without a leg. People were hungry. Homes, including our home, our house, was destroyed. So not only my parents were gone, my siblings were gone, but also Tutsi friends that I knew, I went with to school, high school, college, they were gone. My Hutu friends had left Rwanda. They had gone into exile because what happened in Rwanda, the genocide ended with the defeat of the government that was in place, the Hutu-dominated government, and a Tutsi-dominated rebellion took over the government. In that process of taking over the government, they also committed atrocities against Hutu. So my Hutu friends, they were gone too. And as I said, our house was destroyed. So all of that together made me feel very sad, and bitterness kicked in, anger. So it was terrible. It was an unbearable situation. And as I can imagine, of course, again, lack of sleep, again, headaches and stomachaches. You know, sometimes we have headaches, but we don't know why, because headache is not a disease. Headache is a symptom. And when you have anger, you keep that anger for a long time, you will definitely feel that through headaches. you feel that through your stomachache, and you won't sleep enough. If you don't sleep enough, you won't be productive. You feel it physically, you feel it. So I was feeling all that. I was kind of walking dead. And I was wondering how I was going to survive with that anger, which produced headaches, stomachache, with no sleeping enough. It was very difficult. So I came up with this idea. I mean, while I was searching what should I do to survive, I came up with the idea of forgiveness as a solution. But forgiveness is very difficult to understand. So I had to dig in to understand what should I do, why should I embrace forgiveness, and I had to come up with some rationale, some motivation about forgiveness to understand. Because of forgiveness, many people don't understand what it is, and I didn't, but I digged to find out what it was. And what forgiveness is is really what people should understand. It is that it's not an excuse of the offense, something that happened. You are not excusing it. And you're not excusing the offender. Not at all. You are not. So you are not excusing or that you're basically condemning or knowing that what happened is wrong, but you still have some love toward the offender. That is what we are told, that we need to hate sin, but love the sinner. So you need to hate the wrongdoing, but still some love toward the wrongdoer. Because that wrongdoer can change. Because sometimes we don't know why people did what they did, the evil they did. Maybe they were conditioned, that conditioned them to do what they did. And we should blame more those causes, the context, the circumstances, than the individual himself. So again, forgiveness, it does not really negate justice. If someone does wrong to you, it's fine to call 911. It's fine to bring that person to court, because there is a need for accountability. But again, this is another topic. When it comes to justice, there are two types of justice. There is this criminal justice, but there is also restorative justice, where you try to understand the context and you try to see ways to help that individual who committed a crime at a given time. How can that individual be helped to become a good person and to become a productive member of the community? That's another topic. But in any case, you are not rejecting the idea of justice. And you are also really not depending on that person coming up and offer an apology or ready to reconcile. No, it does not depend on all that. It's just you personally making that decision for forgiveness, not based on how the offender behaves, reacts. But you are making that decision just because you know that you need to free yourself from that anger, that bitterness that undermines your health. So it's basically fundamentally that. Not only forgiveness is good, it's the right thing to do, but mainly you're doing it because you take care of your health. Because the anger and the bitterness, particularly when you keep them longer inside you, they harm your health. And you won't be able to be productive. You won't be able to take care of your loved ones. You won't be able to study as you should. So for your own sake, you need to find a way to embrace forgiveness. Now, but still, when we talk about forgiveness, it's somehow abstract. It's hard really to understand. I had to come up with some motivations to see if it really made some sense. In my case, I came up with a number of motivations that helped me to really understand forgiveness. And one was, it was about my physical, it was about my emotional. That was a motivation. As I said, I had hard time finding sleep. I had headaches, and I understood that I had come up with forgiveness as a remedy to all that. Because it's now known actually that anger and bitterness, they weaken our immune system. And when your immune system is weakened, you become vulnerable to all kinds of disease, including like liver disease, brain disorder, all kinds of diseases. So we need to think about forgiveness as a remedy, as a prevention to all that in terms of your physical, your emotional well-being. And science has proven that people who do not know how to manage their anger, they have high rates of heart disease and they suffer more heart attacks. Over time, if you keep anger, you keep bitterness, your health will be undermined, and that can lead exactly to heart disease and even to heart attacks. So when you consider all that, then you realize, oh, forgiveness is for me, it's not for the other person. And also, you may be familiar with this saying that holding on anger is like drinking poison and wishing your enemy will die. So there are people who think they are right being angry, as if they were harming the other person. Actually, they are harming themselves. So for your own good, you need to find a way to get rid of that anger because it's very destructive. And this reminds me a story of a former prisoner of war. I heard about this story of veterans who fought in Vietnam. So on the Memorial Day, they met in DC, and two men came together. They knew each other back in Vietnam, and one said, "Have you forgiven the people who hold you in prison and tortured you back in Vietnam?" And he said, "I will never, never forgive them." Then the other person said, "Then they still have you in prison." And he was right. You keep that anger, you say, "I will never forgive them." Actually, they don't even remember. They don't even care. So it's as if they have a power over you. So for our own good, we should find a way to move on because that's the right thing to do, but also it's consistent with our well-being. So that was really something that over time helped me to feel, well, I am on the right path of forgiveness. There was another motivation that helped me in this journey. And that was about what I call peace for future generations. And these pictures, actually, these are my children. This one is Nicole. She's in college. She's in her last year, actually, completing a bachelor's degree in finance. And this is my niece, is doing sociology, is in her third year. And she's also, my daughter, Esther, is finishing her bachelor's degree in health science. And this one is the youngest, even though she looks like the oldest. She's the youngest, is now in her second year studying psychology. So when I talk about future generation, I mean people like these, people like you, young people. So back then, after the genocide, I looked at my children who were very young. I looked at many young Rwandans who are innocent like you, and I said, well, I should care more about these people than my parents who are gone and I cannot bring them back. They are gone. So spending time thinking about them, it doesn't make any sense. I should think about ways to help this generation, future generation, to live in peace. Because I remembered that what went on in 1994 in Rwanda was not something new. It was something that started back in the 1950s when Tutsi did wrong and the Hutu responded with another wrong. Then Hutu did wrong to Tutsi, Tutsi reacted with another wrong. And that cycle of violence, it went on from one generation to the next. And in Rwanda, actually, it went from my grandmother to my mother, the generation of my mother, and of course to the generation of my wife, and to the generation basically of my children. But I thought we should really stop that cycle of violence to make sure future generation will not live the life we lived, because that life is wrong. That is about compassion. It's just about compassion toward our children, toward future generation. So forgiveness here is somehow connected with reconciliation, because when you forgive someone who hurt you, it's an opening to reconciliation. Because when you hurt the person who hurt you, you make that person into a victim. And that person will seek to take revenge on you, or revenge on your children or grandchildren, or on someone from your ethnic group or your race. But when you extend your hand to them, as I did back then when I started organizing workshops, bringing Hutu and Tutsi together and discuss what happened, how can we together find ways to stop this and build peace, that's what we should be doing. That's what we should do to break the cycle of violence and give a chance to future generations to live in peace. So that also really helped me. It helped me so much. But there was something else. That was about my faith. So I grew up in a Christian family, and I knew well that my faith, like other faiths like Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, those faiths, they teach forgiveness, not revenge. They teach reconciliation, not retaliation. So growing up, attending church regularly, I learned so much, even though it was fun for me to have a day free to go to church, meet friends, but something sank in. Then I said, well, I learned so much, and I should put that into practice. And some of the things that I learned, and which I remembered really, was this idea of not being overcome by evil, but overcoming evil with good. So what does it mean to overcome evil with good? Let's say someone insults you. How do you overcome that? We tend to insult back, right? But that's wrong. It's not what we are taught in our religion. Any religion, we are taught to overcome that evil with something good. If someone asks you, even if it's someone who denied you a ride, you should really be humble and give them a ride. It costs you nothing. And by doing it, actually that act can transform that person than when you say, oh, you refused me a ride and I'm refusing you a ride. So it doesn't help. Same way, when people do wrong to you, but you show kindness to them when they need your help, then you have a chance to change them. But when you react with something negative, you are somehow validating the wrong they did to you. And you are making them dispose in the future to do you wrong again. So for your own good, you should really do what is right based on your beliefs, the beliefs we all learn in our respective religion, or even people who really do not have religion, they know that, I think there is a saying that two wrong do not make it right. They don't. So we should learn that. Then there is something else here also which said, do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. What does it mean exactly? Because everything we learn in religion, it has a sense, but in general, we don't try to understand what is behind. It basically means having anger, I mean, it's normal. Absolutely. We get angry. It's a normal emotion. But the idea here, don't let the sun go down while you are still angry, means don't keep that anger for a long time. Because if you keep it for a long time, then it will hurt you. It will hurt your health. So for your good, you should get rid of that anger as soon as possible. And there are many ways to do it. So now, about the beliefs, I remember when I went back to Rwanda, I started looking for a job. And one of the jobs I got, the very first job, was to help an American woman who was doing research on gacaca. I don't know if you're familiar with gacaca. Gacaca is a kind of community-based justice that Rwanda put in place to try individuals who were involved in genocide. So together, we'll go throughout the country, visit prisons, talk with community leaders about what should we do so there is accountability, but ways that will help to speed up trials. So we visited many prisons throughout the country. Then in one prison, in Kigali, the capital Kigali, while we were working in this sea of prisoners, I heard someone calling my name. Then I turned. I was very surprised that that person was the former mayor of my hometown. This former mayor of my hometown was also surprised to see me. I think he thought I was dead. Then he saw, because we knew each other, he said, "Oh, how are you? We had this little chat." I asked whether he was involved in the genocide, and he said, "No, I was not involved in the genocide. I am innocent." But I knew he was lying, because I was told he told people to make sure every Tutsi in our district was killed, including my family members. But when I saw him, a former mayor, I saw that this guy was really suffering. He had lost weight. You could see that he was under heavy suffering. So we kept having some conversation. Then, as we were really talking, somehow my anger, my bitterness disappeared, and another emotion came up, and that was really compassion toward him, how he was suffering, because prisons back then, in 1995, they were like hell. They didn't have enough food. They didn't have medication. And people were even afraid to bring them food in prison unless they were really close family members. So before I left, I reached into my pocket, pulled out some money, and gave to him, and I told him for food. Then we left. Once outside the prison, that American woman asked me why I gave money to that man. He said, "So don't you believe he was involved in the genocide?" I say, "I believe." Then he said, "So you don't care about what he did?" I say, "I care, but I don't think my behavior should be dictated by the behavior of my offender. I happen to have money in my pocket, and before me there was a human being who was suffering, and I had to do something to help, regardless of what that former mayor had done against my family members. And I really felt I had to do that. And I think in our lives, we should make, it's not easy, but we should make effort to remain kind, behave the way we should behave without adjusting our behavior based on the behavior of our offenders. Because if we do, then we are not making any difference. We are not helping to change the situation. We are perpetuating that wrong behavior. Now, did all that help me, that journey of forgiveness help me? It did. Absolutely, it did. So my faith increased, of course, but I was also able to achieve so many things, including the fact that I came to this country in 2000, and I was able to go first, able to adjust. Coming to this country as a refugee, poor, when in Rwanda I was rich. I was in the parliament as the president of the parliament. Then all of a sudden, I had to flee my country, come here as a refugee, no money. Well, because mentally I was equipped, I was able really to emerge again, to be able to go to school, learn English, do my master's degree, and do my PhD. And I was able, of course, to write the book. I was able to do many jobs, including the current job that I do with the government. Again, everything I do here, it's about my views, not the views of the government. So I was able to achieve this, and I don't think I would have accomplished what I accomplished if I had not changed from anger, bitterness to forgiveness. I don't think I'll be alive today. I don't think I'll be here standing before you sharing my story. So I had to make that change in order to achieve all this, to be who I am today. And I can tell you my level, if I can use the term, my level of happiness overall has increased dramatically way before the genocide. So today, when I think about the genocide, think about my offenders, think about the wrong people do, I have a completely different mind. And that is very helpful. So now, to recap, let me say that forgiveness is good for your health. It's good for future generations. And it is the right thing to do. I mean, we all know forgiveness is better than revenge. So if something is good for your health, it's something is good for future generations, your children, your grandchildren, and it's the right thing to do, then you should do it. Absolutely. Then forgiveness is a freedom from anger and from bitterness. It's good for your health. And forgiveness, of course, as you know, it's not easy. It's a journey. It's not something you accomplish in a week, in a year. It is something you need to practice. To practice, someone insults you, then you don't insult back. Little things every day in your interaction with your neighbors, your colleagues. So it's not easy, but if I can do it, if I can try, I am sure you can also try and you can get there. I'm glad I did, and I'm glad I can be here, stand before you, share my story. And if I can do all that, you certainly can do it, and thank you very much. Yeah.
I am sure there are questions. I'll let you.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm just wondering how you talk about this with your children.
With my children.
Yeah, how did that conversation come up? Did it start when they were young? Were they
What happened?
Were they around when you did, or was this years later after the event? That's 1,000 questions I just asked.
Oh, yes. I do talk about forgiveness with my children. And you'll be surprised that some of my children actually are very well equipped than I am. You know, there are times in the family we talk and you can talk about this and this. When, for instance, we talk about Hutu and Tutsi, they say, why do you talk about Hutu and Tutsi? Eh? We are all brothers and sisters. Oh, yes, they are, of course. Eh? So they are really good in that, and I'm glad. And that makes me, again, believe strongly that whatever we teach our children, when we teach our children, particularly since they are young, they tend to absorb and practice. Not all the children, but generally, yes. And that's why I think that in schools, if we could introduce like courses about all these values that are good for humanity, including compassion, empathy, love, all of that, teach and try to practice in everything we do, I think we can have a new generation of wonderful people, of peaceful people. Then it will help us really to spend less on police, spend less on prisons, spend less on the military. So I do speak, and the way I speak with my kids about what happened, again, it is with a perspective. I don't tell my children, you know, Hutu did this to your grandparents. They did this to to your uncle, your aunt. No, I don't do that. I try to explain the context, try to explain that some Hutu did this wrong, and at the same time tell them how some Hutu protected our relatives. For instance, one of my stepsister was protected by Hutu together with her husband and their 4 kids. So I tell them what some Hutu did, the wrong they did, what the good other Hutu did, and tell them that it was because of a bad government that created the conditions for a genocide to take place. And I remind them we are all the same, we are brothers and sisters. The wrong is not something associated with one ethnic group. We all can do wrong, can do good. So when you try to talk with your children that way, then you have a chance to raise kids who are not extremists, who will understand well. And that's how I think we should raise our kids. We should talk about whatever happened to us. Yeah. Yes.
In the book, you talk about the negative piece in between genocides. And so I'm wondering, negative piece is the absence of tension.
Yes.
So what are the right positive piece, the presence of justice that need to be in place for every country, and how does forgiveness tie into that positive piece?
Wow. Well, this notion of negative peace and a positive peace, where negative peace is basically when everything seems to be nice, to be okay, to be fine, right? There is no war, there is no confrontation. So, but underneath, the underlying causes of violence still exist. That's really negative peace. That's what we have in many countries, including here. There are tensions there. There is no fighting, but there are tensions. And when you don't deal with those tensions, if there is a trigger, then the tension can come on the surface. So countries need to move toward positive peace where the underlying causes of violence have been dealt with, right? Where you have the rule of law, you have justice. It's not just from one group, but it's justice for everyone. Where you have institutions that are strong enough to check the behavior of individuals, particularly leaders. So you may have a leader who doesn't care about the rule of law, but when you have institutions strong enough then those institutions will be like boundaries. They work. So then you have a police that is functioning properly. When there is 911, the police will go regardless of who needs help. So those are some of the things that you have to have. But at the same time, of course, going now to the other idea of forgiveness, because forgiveness is very personal. Again, let me remind you that when we talk about reconciliation, reconciliation is not always easy, because reconciliation requires two people to agree on coming together, right? So reconciliation cannot happen if the two do not come together. But forgiveness is unilateral. So you can start that process. I mean, you alone can start because you have the power to do it. Meaning, you can do good to the other person, and that good you do to the other person over time, that may change that person. But if you do wrong to that person, then you try closing off the possibility of reconciliation. So forgiveness then can come in, of course, based on personal decision. But if you have a government structures that, I mean, you have government leaders who understand the benefits of forgiveness, then that forgiveness may be a value that will be introduced in the school curriculum, right? So that you can help young kids to understand the benefits, basically help them nurture those values in kids, so when they grow up, they will less likely engage in violence, right? And as I said, if you have many people embracing the virtue of forgiveness, you will have less violence, which means you will spend less money on police, you spend less money on prisons and less money on wars. And those cost a lot, right? I think one prisoner costs almost the same amount that costs the salary of a teacher for the whole year. About to think of something like about 40,000 a year or 50,000 a year per prisoner. So why should we really spend that money? So I think we should find a way to prevent that by investing in education. For instance, the work you're doing with atrocity prevention, it will be a cost-effective investment so that you don't have to spend so much money in things that are not useful at all. And also, you can even think very far in terms of forgiving. People who forgive are less likely to get sick than the people who don't forgive. So if you have a healthier population, you spend less on health care, right? And you also gain, because if people are healthy, they will be more productive. So in any case, in any way, we benefit by investing in conflict prevention, in investing in those values that make us healthier than these expenses the money we spend on things that are not really useful. Yeah. Yes.
Talk about how the negative cycle of violence has gone on for generations.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about teaching forgiveness and peace to future generations if those, like their parents, their grandparents are still around teaching those values of hate, or
Yeah.
they didn't learn that?
Exactly. That's an obstacle. It's an obstacle, but it is something we can overcome individually again. Let's say we are in this class, right? And we are talking about the benefit of forgiveness. How it helped me personally, this is something I have lived. So if we understand the benefit of forgiveness in terms of your health, in terms of reducing the cost of medication, in terms of reducing the cost of prisons, all that, if we really understand that and we make a commitment to start that journey, right? And to start that journey also by talking to our friends about the benefits and changing them. I mean, that can be a movement that can grow and grow the way you may not expect now. And that's how we can do it. And that generation of our parents, your parents, that generation will go, and you can slowly actually transform them. So remember, when you think about Islam started with few people, right? But now, how many billions? Think about Christianity. Started with Jesus with just 12 disciples in a small area. But now you have all over billions, right? So it means we individuals have the capacity, really, if we are committed, to start something that can grow exponentially and help in the future. Over the next 20 years, we can see big change. Otherwise, if we continue on this path we are on of violence, I don't think we will survive as human race. It will be very hard, very hard. So you young people, you have the responsibility to understand this, to understand the benefit of peace, the benefit of forgiveness, benefit of reconciliation, and start implementing it in your life and changing others if you want really to have a completely different country, a different world in the future. Yes?
Do you think the Gacaca courts help people forgive?
Gacaca courts were very problematic. They didn't. Because the Gacaca courts in Rwanda, they work like any court, where you have the accused, the accuser, witnesses, and where in the end, someone will win the case and another person lose the case. So when you have that context, it doesn't help reconciliation. It doesn't at all. So there was no really forgiveness through Gacaca. What was in Gacaca was people who apologized, right? Disclosed some information because they knew they were going to receive reduced sentences. So there were incentives. So it helped really people to have less sentences. It also helped to know, to have the information about what happened, the genocide, who killed who, how people were killed, where people were buried. So it helped that way. But in terms of forgiveness, in terms of reconciliation, it didn't. Yes?
If you're saying that the court did not help, and I've seen a documentary about Rwanda, and I've seen that people were willing to see the perpetrators and to see and to talk to them, and there are perpetrators who left the jail and they are living now near Tutsi families
Yes.
who were really suffering from, who suffered from
Yes.
everything. So what really helped to them reach this forgiveness? Because Rwanda now is an amazing country. It's excellent. The economy is boosting.
Yes.
And there are people who are saying that it's a Singapore of
Africa.
Africa. I have another question.
Yes.
I know that you don't like to talk about politics, but now, for example, the president, Kagame, is in power since, I think, 2003. And now with the amendment, he will stay to 2034. And they are saying it's a democratic process because people, they voted for the referendum.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Do you think that people, they voted for it because they like him, they like the wife and everything they are doing, or they are afraid that the president who will come after him, maybe he will not be as good as him, and like Rwanda will go backward?
Wow, that's good. Good questions. Okay. Starting on the last one about the president of Rwanda, Yes, he was in power. He has been in power technically since 1994. Because in 1994 he was vice president, minister of defense, so he was the one really in power. And when I left Rwanda in 2000, it wasn't because of someone else, it was because of him, because he was very powerful. So he changed the constitution over and over, and now, and the last time he was elected with 99 point something %. So does it mean the 99.9 something people like him? What do you think? Huh? No way. No way. And before that, the referendum to change the constitution was voted with 98 point something, right? So it's not really true. So it's not a democracy. In a transparent election, I don't think he can win any election. I think the reason why all that is happening is in Rwanda people are not free to vote who they want. We have many political parties, but you will never hear a political party opposing the government on any policy. So it's a dictatorship, and we are afraid that if nothing changes, people may organize and seek to unseat him through violence, which will be really very bad. Now, coming back to your question about Hutu and Tutsi in villages, living together, helping each other, all that, well, they don't have choice. They don't have choice. When you have your neighbor, it's not like in cities in America where you have your neighbor, you don't care about your neighbor. If something happens, you call police. If you want to go to hospital, you call ambulance. No. In Rwanda, you depend on your neighbor. So if your neighbor is Hutu or Tutsi, you have to find a way to live with them in peace. So it's very practical. It's not about forgiveness. But we have had cases of what is really forgiveness. People because of their beliefs. People because of their willing, really determination to heal from the past. People who came together and talked about what happened, everything, then they decided to leave all that behind and move forward. So it has happened. But it wasn't because of Gacaca. Actually, most of those people did not participate in Gacaca because they said, we don't want to go in Gacaca and confront our neighbor. Because if you confront your neighbor and eventually your neighbor is sentenced to 10 years in prison, how are you going to live with their kids? Your kids, how are they going to live with their kids? So it's a hatred. So many people decide not to do it at all. Yeah. Okay, yes, in the corner. Say again?
You mentioned how the Rwandan genocide was something that happened over a period of time because of numerous different events. What country in the modern day do you believe is the highest risk for another genocide?
Okay, so another country now we're at high risk of another genocide. It's difficult to tell. So let's say in Africa we have countries that are in a conflict right now are South Sudan. But South Sudan may not have really genocide because the two communities are apart. So each community has its own territory. When you have that situation, it's unlikely. But of course, genocide, it doesn't have to be a big number. It can be even a small number, provided the intent to exterminate exists. But South Sudan, I don't think. In Burundi, it's possible because there is a conflict in Burundi going on. And in Burundi, like Rwanda, people live side by side. And they have had a conflict in the past. Situation today is no good. In that case, it may. Another country in Africa that has a conflict is Somalia. But Somalia, it's one ethnic group. they of course have a clan. So I don't really know which country is likely to experience a genocide. So I don't know. But you can look maybe at, there is something, the peace index, which shows level of peace in each country. Maybe that may give you a hint. A country that scores poorly maybe may be the country that is at risk. Okay, yes?
So, is it safe to say, like, for example, looking at Congo, and, you know, prior they had their own issues. So after the Rwandan genocide, when the Tutsi took power and the Hutus fled into Congo, is it safe to say that that also became a trigger as to the conflicts that started arising in Congo? Not to blame it all on the genocide, but that's one of the triggers that actually impacted the violence that started there.
Yes, that's true. When Rwandan refugees went to Congo, it was about more than 1 million in eastern Congo. That was a trigger for violence in Congo. It was a trigger because refugees organized and started launching attacks on Rwanda. Then the Rwandan government made a decision to invade Congo, basically to disorganize the rebels. Then the Rwandan government decided actually to go ahead and remove the former president using a small rebellion for the former, the Laurent Desire Kabila. Then Rwandans, together with other countries, they managed to remove the president of Congo. They put in place another president. And that was the beginning of rebellions. So rebellion started, and now in Eastern Congo alone, Eastern Congo, which is of course a huge area, there are more than 20 armed groups. And that situation has been going on since 1996, when the Rwanda invaded Congo. So that was absolutely a trigger. Yeah. And again, this is how a conflict in one country, if it's not dealt with, it can spill over. So Congo it has the negative piece, of course, but because what was going on in Rwanda was not dealt with, it spilled into Congo. And because the Congo, Eastern Congo was not under really the control of the central government, in Burundi, the rebel from Burundi were able to organize from Congo and attack Burundi. So a conflict in one country can spill over. That's why we should have that understanding that if something is going wrong somewhere, we should deal with, because it may affect us in a way or another. Yeah. Yes.
What actions do you think other countries could have taken to like stop or like lessen the genocide in Rwanda?
Oh yeah, the international community could have done something. Yeah. One is Rwanda is a small country. The Rwandan military was not so strong, right? So if the UN, which had already troops in Rwanda, had used those troops to stop the genocide, I don't think the genocide would have continued. It would have stopped absolutely. The same way in Congo, for instance, in 2013, the UN decided to use its troops against one rebel group called M23, which had the support of Rwanda and Uganda. And UN troops, using their power, they were able to defeat that rebel group, and conflict ended in that area. So the UN could have stopped the genocide in Rwanda, but they decided not to, to just stand by. Yeah, yes.
How did politicians and other entities like help to better the life of the children that was left without any family members?
How
did politicians and other entities help to better the lives of the children that were left without any family members?
You know, after the genocide, there were many orphans, many widows, but many international non-profit organizations stepped in to help. That was very helpful. Also, the government of Rwanda, of course, with the resources, helped. And there was also a fund for genocide survivors that was put in place to basically, particularly to provide tuition to orphans and to build homes for survivors. The UN stepped in, the US stepped in to help. Actually, when Bill Clinton visited Rwanda in 1998, he gave, I think, it was a time when that fund for genocide survivors had just been created, and Bill Clinton put in $1 million. And of course, the US helped in many other ways. So kids were really, they received assistance. And some of them went on to graduate school because of that fund. Yeah. Then, yes? Oh, okay. Yes.
As you mentioned earlier, you were granted asylum in Canada. I was just wondering if that opportunity was accessible to many people in the country or certain factors were calculated in that.
Yeah, actually, at that time when I went to Canada, and after a few months, the genocide ended, I decided to go back knowing that I had no chance to return. So it was really risky, it was crazy. It was crazy, so I went without no chance to return because my application for asylum was pending. So I was never granted asylum in Canada. But Canada did receive many Rwandans. And there is a big community in Canada. There is a big community of Rwandans in Canada today. Yeah. Yes? Oh, there is one who didn't. Yes.
Thank you. I have two questions basically. First is, what do you think about the impact of ICTR in Rwandan case? The impact of ICTR on forgiveness and reconciliation. My second question is, do you think public commemoration of the genocide can build a reconciliation and forgiveness in Rwanda?
Yeah. So the first question about the ICTR. So ICTR was about prosecution, even though it had a clause, that prosecution will help in reconciliation, which is questionable. But it was about prosecution, and they did prosecute many people, particularly the high-profile individuals who were in the former government. That was really very, very effective, but it wasn't about forgiveness, it wasn't about reconciliation. And the issue of it, of course, is that that court was supposed to try every crime committed in Rwanda from January 1994 to December 1994. But that court, like Gacaca court, they only tried people involved in the genocide, but they didn't try other crime, including the crime committed by the Tutsi-dominated rebellion, which was fighting since 1990. So they didn't try that. So based on that, the ICTR was not a tool for reconciliation. It was about
Impact of public commemoration?
Commemoration, yes. Commemoration. So we have a commemoration, like in Rwanda, this April, particularly from April 7th, there will be commemoration all over the country, commemoration of genocide. And it has been going on since the end of the genocide in 1994. So those commemorations, I don't think they contribute to reconciliation. So why? In a country like Rwanda, where you have Hutu and Tutsi as neighbors, and you commemorate the genocide, what it means basically is to say in 1994, Tutsi were killed by Hutu. So how do Hutu feel when they are reminded that they killed their neighbors, when kids, young people like you, are reminded that their parents killed Tutsi in this horrible way and this, well, I don't think it helps with reconciliation. There should be other ways of commemorating the wrong done in the past. I mean, I don't have a formula. I have some ideas of what can be done. But the point is, commemoration is not helpful, and we should find a way of commemorating, or even anything else we do in post-genocide Rwanda, anything we do should be consistent with reconciliation. If something does not contribute to reconciliation, it should be set apart, aside, absolutely, yes. But commemoration are generally now used as propaganda for the government to show, oh, we are here, we stopped the genocide, and no one should tell us what to do. Every time there is a criticism against the government will say, okay, we stopped the genocide, and you were standing by, you did nothing, what do you have to say? But it's not really good in long term for Rwandans. It's not like Israel. You know, in Israel, after the Holocaust, they moved from different countries. They went to live in their separate country. So they can commemorate because they don't have to take into consideration their neighbors. But in Rwanda, we have to live together. We live together forever. So we have to accommodate our neighbors. It's no good to remind, let's say, in your family, if you hurt your brother or your sister, right? Would you like in your family to remember every year that on this date you hit your brother or your sister? You don't like that. You want to come together and move on, focus on the future. Yeah. Yes.
So, in your opinion, what kind of preventative measures could have been taken? Like, for example, you know, you mentioned that historically the two ethnic groups always had tension, and it wasn't until, I'm guessing, the assassination of the president and the genocide started, like the next day, I believe.
Yes.
But days leading up until then, was there some kind of tension going on, or was it like the assassination that kind of took it off? So, like, you know, what kind of preventative measures in that case could have been implemented?
Yeah. I think if you even go back a little bit back years before the genocide, we had what we call negative peace. Absolutely. Growing up in Rwanda as a Tutsi, I didn't have access to, I mean, any Tutsi, no Tutsi had access to public office. The government would just pick maybe one or two, that's it. For instance, within a government of about 25 ministers in Rwanda, there was always just one Tutsi. So university, you could not access university except very few Tutsi. So there was a discrimination built in the system. Then there were also many refugees in neighboring countries. They were not allowed to come back home. The president would say, the country is small, we don't have the capacity to accommodate more people. So people were denied their right to their country, right? But if we had really worked on those two, making sure there is equal right for Tutsi inside Rwanda, that refugees have the right to return home, that anyone can access to a high school or college based on their merit, or that, I don't think we would have had the war which went from 1990 to 1994. I don't think the genocide itself would have taken place. Then when the war started, there was negotiations between the Tutsi-dominated rebel group and the Hutu-dominated government. When they came together, they didn't really have a genuine negotiation because they didn't discuss the ethnic issue, which was really the issue. They discussed the power sharing, but the power sharing was not that issue, was not the main issue. And because of that, neither the rebel group had interest in implementing the peace accord, or the president. The president himself did not have interest in implementing the peace accord, because the rebel group, the Tutsi-dominated rebel group, knew very well that if they implemented the peace accord, which meant to be part of the government for 22 months and then have general elections, they were not going to win elections because they are a minority. On the other hand, the Hutu dominated the government, the Hutu who were in power, he came from the minority within the Hutu population. So he too knew that implementing the peace accord was going to lead to the loss of power. So they were not interested in implementing the peace accord. So both kept really engaging in violence. So, and then, but if the international community had really understood the causes of the conflict and make sure they're addressing the underlying causes, I think we would have had a good peace accord, and that peace accord would have been implemented, but we didn't have it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. One more question, then so who do we pick to? Who didn't speak? You spoke, yes? You didn't speak, right? So you and the female, so who do we pick?
Okay, 2 more questions.
2 more questions. Yes. How about you? Yes.
Going back to memorials and commemoration.
Mm-hmm.
So with memorials like as controversial as the Kigali Memorial,
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, is there any grassroots efforts to challenge that state narrative at all,
Mm-hmm.
or to create a historical dialogue in how commemoration should be handled, or is it not the right atmosphere for it?
No, there is no discussion about that within Rwanda. No one would dare raise that question. Absolutely. If you do, then you'll be arrested. You'll be accused of denial of genocide. So it's very risky. You cannot do that. But the people from outside, people who live outside Rwanda, they have discussed all this. Many Tutsis do say, well, we should remember all victims because we are all brothers and sisters. And when you remember both, Hutu and Tutsi, it doesn't mean you equate the genocide with other crimes. If you admit that Hutu were killed, you don't really negate the genocide at all. So there is no discussion about that within Rwanda now.
So just within the context of various different levels of violence, there's oftentimes a very intense and critical discourse on basically the identification of victims and survivors.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, to what degree have you ascribed either of these identities to your situation, and to what degree do you think that they are helpful in the forgiveness and healing process?
I think the identities exist, right? We do have people in Rwanda. Everyone in Rwanda is either Hutu or Tutsi or Twa. The Twa is a very small minority, less than 1%, and they were never involved in the crisis. So Hutu and Tutsi, they know. Everyone knows. You may not tell, looking at them, tell who is who, but they know. And they have been victimized in one way or another, because of that. Or they have victimized other people based on that. So taking into consideration their identity, I think we should do it. Unlike what the government of Rwanda does now, saying there are no Hutu, no Tutsi, we are all Rwandans. But even the government knows how to select, right? So identities are essential, of course, and we should have the courage to come together as Hutu and Tutsi, and they do that actually. I have many Hutu friends, and we get together, we discuss, we talk about these issues, we share our stories, what happened to me, what happened to our family. I mean, we do discuss. And through those type of discussions, particularly through that dialogue, when you have a chance to hear the other person basically it helps you to put yourself in their shoes, understand them, and it helps you really get closer and build some bonds. Because I know there are many Tutsi who never had a chance to discuss with Hutu what happened in genocide. There are Hutu who don't have any Tutsi friends, they never discussed. But when you have a chance, you learn a lot. I have learned a lot by discussing with others. So if we can come together as two communities, discuss genuinely what happened, and then say, so what should we do to give a chance to future generations to live in peace? People will be committed, be willing really to do something. But if we pretend everything is fine, we have moved on, we have a good economy in Rwanda, we have all this, no, all that can collapse in a minute. And I think you know the example of Syria. Syria was a wonderful country with everything, buildings, schools, but now what is happening? Everything is down because there were underlying issues. In Rwanda before the genocide, Rwanda was really good compared to Congo and Uganda, but in just a few years, everything down. So we cannot pretend that the issue has been resolved. We have to confront that issue if we want to make sure what happened, it doesn't happen again. Now to close, let me say this. I'm very happy that I came. I like to talk with young people like you, and thank you very much, Nadia, thank you very much, Max, for giving me this opportunity. And I should just recap a little bit. When we talk about forgiveness, it's really fundamentally first about you, the victim. It's about your health. It's about your well-being and the well-being of those around you, the well-being of your community, of your country. It's you being productive and be who you should be. And it's the right thing to do, absolutely, right? So, it's not easy. It's not easy to do it. But when you start, really, you start on that journey of transformation with small acts of kindness. Someone insults you, well, that person maybe is going through tough situations and you move on. Someone refuses a ride, well, if they ask you something, you do it. It doesn't cost you anything. But those small acts of kindness, of goodness, they add up, particularly when you have more people doing it. And those acts of kindness, those acts of forgiveness, of seeking reconciliation, can really help transform you, transform your community, your country, and the world, absolutely. And if I can try, despite the suffering I went through, I have no doubt that anyone can do it. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.